Welcome back, friends. This is the continuation of our topic, which is gaseous exchange and respiration. And today we have the session 2. In the previous session, we discussed about the introduction to gaseous exchange and respiration. And today we are going to continue with the Ficks law and to discuss why they need to have the special respiratory structures in the higher animals as compared to the smaller organisms. So as we said in the previous session that in gaseous exchange and respiration, we'll be discussing all aspects regarding the gaseous exchange, that is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the cells of living organism and the environment. Also discuss about the aspects of respiration, that is how the body uses glucose, proteins and fat to get energy which can be used by the cells to perform different activities, as how we shall discuss later in respiration. Now, when we are discussing about the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between the living cells and the environment, I said that actually it's not the cells which are exchanging the air or exchanging the oxygen with the environment, but we have the special respiratory structures in higher animals and plants which tend to perform the function of gaseous exchange. Now, the rate of gaseous exchange between the environment and the blood, always in higher animals we have the blood which tend to transport oxygen or which tend to transport respiratory gases from the respiratory surfaces to the point where the gases is required. The rate of gaseous exchange depends on different factors, as we shall discuss later. But how the different factors they affect the rate of gaseous exchange can be explained by the Ficks law. Now, Ficks law provides the way considering how the maximum rate of diffusion of respiratory gases is achieved. So, a short description of Ficks law. Ficks law provided the way of considering how maximum rate of diffusion of respiratory gases can be achieved. Or Ficks law is the law which explains how different factors which affect the rate of respiration. How are they affecting the rate of respiration? That if we will increase a certain factor or if we will decrease a certain factor, will affect respiration in a certain way. In order to know that, we need to consider the Ficks law. Now we are stating the Ficks law as the diffusion rate of respiratory gases, the diffusion rate of respiratory gas through a respiratory surface is proportional to the surface area of respiratory surface, proportional to the difference in concentration of gases either side of the membrane, and inversely proportional to the thickness of respiratory surface. Now, from the Ficks law, you can see directly that the rate of diffusion R, mathematically R, is direct proportional to the surface area, direct proportional to the concentration difference or concentration gradient, and inversely proportional to the thickness of the membrane. That is to say, if we increase the surface area, we are increasing the rate of diffusion of the respiratory gases. If we increase the concentration difference, we are increasing the rate of diffusion. And if we are increasing the thickness of the membrane, we are decreasing the rate. So this is very important. And the surface area or respiratory surfaces, they should be equipped with adaptation having higher surface area, higher concentration difference. The adaptation should be able to maintain the higher concentration difference, and they should be equipped with the very thin, they should be very thin so as to allow the faster diffusion of gases. Now, organisms acquire their oxygen either directly from the atmosphere or from oxygen dissolved in water, depending on the environment or habitat of the organism. There are marked difference in oxygen content of air and water. A given volume of air contains 4 more, that is 21% by volume of oxygen. than an equal volume of water that contains 0.8 by volume of oxygen. So air, or organisms which acquire oxygen from air, it is very easier to acquire oxygen from air as compared with the process of acquiring oxygen from water. Now what we are saying is that therefore it follows that an aquatic organism such as fish must pass a large volume of water, a corresponding much greater volume of water over its gaseous exchange surface than an equal breathing vertebrate passes air in order to obtain sufficient oxygen for its metabolic need. Kwa wanyama ambao ni aquatic, they acquire their oxygen from water, so they must pass a large amount of water in their respiratory surfaces ili waweze kupata gesi ya kutosha. However, animals wanna pass only small amount of oxygen. So what we are saying is that this requires a different ventilation mechanism in aquatic organisms. Water is also more than 5 times denser than air and 100 times more viscous. So as you can see, the density of water and the viscosity of water is higher as compared with the air. So this will result into a different ventilation mechanism in aquatic animals as compared with the terrestrial one. Now it therefore requires more energy to pass water over the respiratory surface. Oxygen diffuses about 100 times slower through water than through air, which means that it is harder to maintain a steep concentration gradient across the respiratory surface. It is not surprising then that fish are amenable to achieve the higher metabolic rate of animal with the lungs. Kwa hiyo fishes, they are using gills to respire, but they can't achieve the higher metabolic rate as how animals they achieve. That is because they can't perform the gaseous exchange as how animals they are performing gaseous exchange. Now in the next lecture we discuss the need for the special respiratory structures and the pigment in higher animals. So let us end up here. I hope you have understood about the concept of Ficks law, and I hope you have understood about the concept of terrestrial and aquatic animals, why there is different ventilation mechanism. Sometimes you may be asked why there is a different ventilation mechanisms between the aquatic and terrestrial animals. It is very important to understand this because failure to explain about the concepts of density and viscosity of water, and failure to explain about the concept of why the fish should pass a large amount of water, or aquatic organism should pass a large amount of water in order to acquire the same amount of oxygen as animal, will lead to a lower performance in your question. Most of teachers, they want you to be competent, and they want you to answer the question in a way that you will be competent, regardless on the boundaries which you are asked by your teacher. Thank you everybody. Don't forget to share the lecture, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you need the notes, you may contact me with the contacts which are in the description below. Thank you. Let me wish you nice studies.